So, autumn phase. So this is the luteal phase, the downward energy phase. So I'm going to talk about this actually in almost two sections. So we do talk about it as being autumn, but in Chinese medicine in particular, they talk about having late summer and autumn, which I think is quite a good analogy for this part of the cycle, because it does stretch from day 16. It obviously depends on when you ovulate. So you've got your small window of ovulation. So it could be 16, it could be 18, it could be day 20, particularly if you have a longer cycle. But then it goes all the way up until you bleed, which is winter. So your luteal phase can be 7 days long. It could be 15 days long. So depending on what's going on. Most people feel a bit of a shift around day 20 or day 21. So if we talk about it being two parts, what you might find at the beginning of this autumn phase, you've got the leveling out of estrogen and progesterone. Then in the second part of it, you have got that dramatic drop off of both estrogen and progesterone. So the small window of ovulation, everything's risen, feeling fabulous. Then we have a little plateau at the beginning of this autumn season. Obviously, if we've not got pregnant, we're then going to see the hormones drop off. So that's why it's sort of two parts to this season. What I will mention, it's not appropriate for who is on the call today, but for anybody watching back, if you did want to get pregnant and stay pregnant, you want really good levels of progesterone for at least 10 days after ovulation. Even if you're not trying to get pregnant, to avoid really, really bad PMS symptoms and sort of lots of discomfort, again, we want to see a nice level of progesterone. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. So in terms of the moon, it's the waning moon, it's the dimming, she's reducing, she's still visible in the sky, but she's getting a little bit less every evening. So how are we going to feel physically? We may be going to feel a bit hungry in this phase. I wrote hungry in capital letters, mostly because I was starving when I wrote this, but hungry and a little more tired. So just after ovulation, you might actually feel like your appetite has just leveled out. You're not too fussed about food. You can take it or leave it. There's a little bit of a window, and then all of a sudden, the hormones start to drop off, and you feel a little bit ravenous. Sometimes like you could eat everything, and you don't know what you fancy, but you want to eat pizza, you want to eat crisps, you want to eat potatoes, carb it up. That's how you might feel. You might feel in the beginning that you still want to exercise, so you've still got a little bit of energy, you're still performing, you can still go for a run, you can still do everything that you normally do. But again, as the season starts to really go down, the motivation for exercise can really just bottom out. So this is the point where you start, oh God, should go to the gym, should go to the run, oh God, I need to get up and do the yoga, but you have no motivation to do it. It's perfectly normal. We don't need to feel guilty about that. You might feel a bit of bloating. You've got an increased size of the womb, so it's plumped up. So it might feel very heavy, and your muscles can begin to ache. So just like we were talking about. So the muscles around your stomach might ache because, as we spoke about last time, the weight of your uterus is suspended by two little muscles. So you might start to feel hips ache, which in turn can make lower back ache, shoulders ache, you're just all one beautiful machine. So if one part of that is just feeling a bit achy, the rest of it is going to have a knock-on effect, particularly if we do stop moving and we do just sort of slump down. It does start to increase. And then add in, if it is autumn like it is now, it's cold, it's damp, everything's just going to be playing into that sort of round, and you're walking around like this and you're just sort of curled in. So but this is the point where you're going to be more susceptible to feeling achy. And as the progesterone starts to drop off, you are going to be more susceptible to injury. So progesterone is a wonderful muscle builder. So hence why ovulation and shortly after ovulation is a really brilliant window to build muscle, do weight training, weightlifting, body resistance work. But once that drops off, you've not got that progesterone to build the muscle, so you're gonna be a little bit more prone to strains, to pulls, and then estrogen drops off, so your joints aren't as lubricated. And then add in perhaps perimenopause, where your levels aren't quite reaching what they have done. Again, those aches, those pains, those injuries, that you're more susceptible. So it's a time to be a little bit careful with your physicality. So let's move on to the really interesting stuff. How will we feel emotionally? So, autumn vibes. It is very natural to have some mood swings and to feel very low on energy. This is a real time for rest and space and self-nourishment. So again, at the beginning of the autumn season, or if you think about it as that lovely late summer vibe, you might feel quite nourished, a little bit quieter than the summer. Feel like you just want to be alone with special people, and then maybe you're alone but not feeling irritated by people. As we go down into the drop off, we're going to start to feel more tested by outside sources. And we're also going to start to feel a little bit more sensitive to what other people say. So something that doesn't bother you normally might really upset you. If you've ever been in the middle of Aldi and just burst into tears because you couldn't find the tomato ketchup, it was quite possibly because you're in your luteal phase. Or if somebody's just said something and it's really rubbed you up the wrong way, and then you're just sat there seething, again, the chances are it's going to be in this phase. So your patience is shorter. There is a sort of a small period after your ovulation where progesterone is quite high, that you might feel really lovely mothering instinct. So you might almost feel like you want to be closer to your kids, closer to your husband, partner, friends, family. Again, once that starts to drop off, they call progesterone the mothering hormone, you start to feel a little bit less like mothering everybody else, which is fine because you need to turn that mothering instinct onto yourself. We're going to hear a lot more from the inner critic at this point. So that little voice that we've talked about, you might want to give her a name at this point. Now we're becoming a little bit more focused on her. You can name her something. You're going to hear a lot more from her. So this is the point in the cycle where you're going to start to maybe doubt yourself. And some people have almost described it as like a switch has gone off. Day 19, you're on social media, you're putting stuff out, you're feeling wonderful, I'm cracking it, I'm doing it, like boom, 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 getting these emails out. Day 21 hits, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so shit at my job, nobody likes me, why am I talking? This is not what, I've got nothing good to say, blah, 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 blah. And it can be like chalk and cheese, which is just bizarre that 24 hours can completely flip the switch. But I've definitely had that, and it's almost happened in the same day before, where the morning I've been just brilliant, and then by tea time I'm just crying into my dinner like, oh, I've had a really rubbish day. I've had a brilliant day, but in my head it's been awful. It's it can be tricky. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that inner critic after a little bit of breath work and a few other things. So what I wanted to say, though, it's not all bad. So some people really struggle in this part of their cycle. And if you're trying to conceive, this is a really tricky time. And even if you have struggled to conceive and you now have your children, this part of the cycle can hold a little bit of residual trauma for you, because your body remembers what it felt like to be in that sort of trying to conceive bubble, where it's tough, it's hard, it's disappointing, you're second guessing your body, etc. So the body always does remember. So again, it can be tricky, but there is a big fat silver lining to this part of the cycle. And like autumn is actually my favorite season, once you start learning to cycle track, this part of your cycle can almost be your favorite as well. So you've got some very distinct superpowers that are very, very different from the rest of your cycle. The first superpower, very similar to in menstruation, it is the BS detector, the bullshit detector. So this is where that fires up, and you're going to feel like you have got a bit of a deeper gut instinct, and it's very real, and you can actually read people better. And it is because you're a little bit more raw, you are a bit more stripped back, so you can see other people more clearly, because you're not dealing with your own stuff, you're not holding up your own walls, you're not putting on sort of any kind of pretense, so you're seeing things very, very clearly. So if anybody's lying to you, or perhaps just some half truths, you're going to feel it, and you're going to feel it in that gut, that real sort of not sure what's right here. So it's a good place to be if you're in a job where you have to interview people. A really good place to know if they're lying. A good time to be asking people some questions you want answers to, and so you might not get the answers, but you'll at least know that you're being told the truth, or perhaps not in some cases. Which moves on nicely that the second superpower is the ability to start asking the really tough questions. So if you do embrace this part of the cycle, and if you do the work through the other parts of your cycle, you sort of drop into a little bit of power in autumn, where you have got questions, you want them answered of yourself and others, and you can do those deep questions. So for instance, if it's yourself and you're doing some healing work, you're doing even just some assessment work, particularly if, the kids are getting older, or, you're going through perimenopause, you're starting to ask those questions like, well, what do I want from life? How do I see my future? Am I in the right job? Am I in the right relationship? Those big, deep questions that you want to keep revisiting, this is a really good time to sit with those questions, do some journaling, do some meditation, and sort of deep dive into yourself. But also, if you want to ask other people the deep questions, then you're in a good space at the beginning of the autumn period, not so much like the day before you bleed. We need to be clever about this. If you're feeling a little bit stabby, don't be asking questions that you don't want the answers to. So it's a bit of a self-assessment as well. Am I okay to hear the truth on this? But you're able to put those questions out. And then the inner critic wisdom. You are able to see what is no longer serving you. So you might, if you're anything like me, decide that on day 25, you're going to clean out the cupboard that's been annoying you all month. And you're going to get rid of all that stuff that you've not needed. So that is a very physical sense of just getting rid of what no longer serves you. It can be cleaning the bathroom. Always want to clean the bathroom at this time of my cycle, because I just want to wipe away things. I want to get rid of it. So it is a great time for decluttering, great time for organizing your life, particularly as You're probably not feeling as creative as you were in the sort of the spring and the summer, and you're not feeling quite as focused. You can feel a little bit focused, even up to sort of, if you've got a longer cycle, even up to sort of day 27, 28, if you're going to 35 days, you can still have a little bit of focus. But towards the end, when that focus has dropped off and you need to do something that's a little bit more engaging, doing the cleaning, the clearing, the sorting, the organising, really great here. And you'll really be able to say, well, have I used this food processor that's been in my cupboard for 6 months and I've never actually got it out of the box, or that juicer that I used once and never used again. So it's a great time for that. But from an inner point of view, again, it's great to assess what isn't serving you anymore. So friendships, relationships, ideas, thoughts, goals, being able to revisit what you're trying to manifest. This is we said in menstruation, it's a great time to start manifesting, write down your intentions, etc. So we've come full circle through now. Before we start to move into that bleed, into that manifestation, it's a good time to go, well, actually, do I want it? Do I want that job? Do I want that contract? Do I want, to go to Bali and live with the monks for 3 weeks? Quite possibly, yes, it sounds lovely at the moment. But just assessing those manifestations, and then tweaking things and releasing things that you don't need anymore, and not being sad about it, not feeling bad about it, but being able to go, no, it's rubbish, don't want it anymore, and just chuck it out. So this is sort of the no, I like to call it the no frills area. You're just going to go, no, get rid, and then you're just left with the good stuff. So actually go into your bleed, you've got all that good stuff. You've got a lovely clean and sorted house. If only it lasted that long. But you've also got a nice clean and sorted mind as well. So how best to support this phase? So I'm going to go through a few of these, and then we're going to move into some real practical stuff. So movement in this phase, like I said, you can feel heavy, you might feel achy. So you want to start dialing down the high impact stuff. If you feel like going for a run, wonderful. I love going for a run. If you feel like doing high impact exercise, I'm always a great believer in listening to your body. And also, a lot of us find doing those things quite de-stressing. Just to bear in mind that your body doesn't know the difference between going for a run or Zumba to being chased by a tiger. It thinks that you're stressed out. So your body is going to be in that stressed out phase because you are stressing it out. Your mind might feel a little bit clearer, but the body's not going to know the difference. So if you do want to do those things, just making sure you're dropping in to a more parasympathetic nervous state afterwards. So if you're doing the run, you're doing the high impact, doing the yoga, the breathing, the meditation afterwards, so you can bring yourself down, so that you can just signal to the body that it isn't in a stressed out state. Because what we know with stress is that it starts to shut down the body, and the first thing it shuts down is the reproductive system, because you don't need it if you're being chased by a tiger. So just to be very mindful of that when you're choosing your exercises. Obviously, yoga is wonderful at this point in your cycle. Slow flow, yin yoga, flexibility, those aches and pains, like really trying to get into some nice yin postures, is just perfect. Meditation, you might start to find a little bit easier. So we talked about spring, summer, it being a little bit more tricky. We're now dropping into that more spiritual zone of our cycle. So you might find visualization a little bit easier. You might start to notice colours and shapes, and you might even get visions if that's something that you sort of experience when you're doing meditation. Yoga nidras are perfect at this point. So whether you go to a yoga nidra or listen to one, it's a brilliant app called Insight Timer, which I'll put in our resources, which is, it's just got thousands of meditations on, but the yoga nidras on there are really good, and you can just relax from anywhere for like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes if you've got that time. Lovely. And just letting yourself experience what's, whatever's coming through. Sleep can start to be a little bit tricky in this area, particularly those last few days before the bleeds. You might find that your temperature goes up and down. So one minute you're roasting, blooming hot, and the next minute you're absolutely freezing cold. Your body's it's dropping all sorts of things. The hormones are dropping. Testosterone is also dropping. So, it's going to be a little bit higgledy-piggledy. You might find that you go to sleep okay, and then you wake up in the middle of the night and your mind's just like, and you can't get back to sleep. That's when those yoga nidras are going to come in really handy. Pop it on and let yourself be guided back into sleep, because you need more sleep. You're going to need more sleep up until bleed. So maybe trying to add on a little bit of extra time to your nightly routine. So going to bed at like 9:30 instead of 10:30 just gives you a chance to sort of wind down, get some good quality sleep. And then nutrition-wise, as we said at the beginning, you might not feel too hungry after ovulation, and then before bleed, you're going to start to feel a little bit hungry. You're going to crave carbs. Mine is pizza. Always crave pizza. I know the bleed's coming because I want pizza. And garlic bread as well. So, but we've all got our own crisps, chocolate, all of the different things. But those things aren't going to make you feel much better. And particularly if you're having heavy bleeding, lots of bloating, painful periods, those big gluten, sugar, dairy, it's not going to help. So trying to replace those with food that won't spike your blood sugar and crash. So rich proteins, good quality meats if you eat them, chickpeas, hummus. I have started craving hummus now at this part of my cycle, which is quite nice. Lots of good fats, just lots of really good foods. So, don't feel like you can't eat. Dieting and fasting at this point of the cycle is just not a good idea. Progesterone loves food. It does not like being starved. So if we want to keep those progesterone levels nice and steady until they drop off, making sure it is fed. I kind of picture progesterone as a little green angry monster that just loves food. And so you just want to keep feeding it. And it's so a nice, happy green monster rather than one that's just going to run off and cause you to be very angry. Dark chocolate can help. So like 70% dark chocolate upwards can help with the sugar cravings. So, just making sure you get lots of good stuff, keep the probiotics going. Foods that can help progesterone, I've been researching, are grapefruit and fennel. I'm not a huge fan of fennel. If you are, wonderful, because in Ayurveda they love fennel. It's everywhere. I wish I loved it. So if you do, get it in the diet, but particularly at this point. And then a few more of the holistic practices, and we're going to practice some of these today. The massage. So last session. No, we've practiced the womb massage. I've lost track. You can continue the womb massage and the castor oil packs that we've talked about through this part of the cycle unless you're trying to conceive. If you're trying to conceive, please just avoid those completely. Take a break. If you're not trying to conceive, then you can carry on all the way up until bleed. We don't suggest using castor oil close to the bleed. So if you have got sort of quite a regular cycle and a couple of days before, just trail that castor oil off. It can increase the blood flow. It's good in the respect that if you are trying to cleanse, it's brilliant. But if you're already having flooding, you don't want to be adding to that. So it's a bit of a judgment call. And then once you start bleeding, we leave the massage and the castor oil until you finished bleeding. So you can carry on, and you can add in a little bit of aromatherapy. So lemons, grapefruit oils, and wild orange aromatherapy is lovely for this part of the cycle. Equally, clary sage, we brought that up before. It can be good, particularly if you sort of do have that tense feeling in the womb before you bleed. So that can be nice as well. So there's plenty you can do to support yourself. Excuse me. But the things we're going to dive into today, we're going to have a little bit of breath work, and then we're going to talk a little bit as well about reflexology. So doing it on yourself is a great practice at this point, particularly if massaging the womb feels a bit uncomfortable. So if you start to get really bloated and it's a bit tender to touch, actually massaging into the feet and a little bit into the fingers as well can feel really nice. So that's what we're going to dive into. And then we're going to swing back round to that inner critic and have a little bit more of a chat about her.